Dutch van der Linde lost $5.4 million on a single botched business deal, and that was just the beginning of the end. Forget what you think you know about outlaws and honor. This isn't a story about a dying West. It's the story of a failed startup, a delusional CEO, and the worst business plan in American history. We're cracking open the books on the van der Linde gang to perform a complete financial autopsy. This is the story of how Dutch's ego bankrupted everyone he ever cared about.
Every failed company starts with a charismatic founder selling an impossible dream. For the van der Linde gang, that founder was Dutch, and the dream was a savage utopia. His business model? A mix of petty cons and a Robin Hood marketing gimmick. Back in the 1870s, Dutch and Hosea Matthews, the gang's co-founders, were just two grifters who met trying to rob each other. They were the classic startup duo. Dutch, the visionary CEO with the silver tongue, and Hosea, the pragmatic COO who actually made things work. Their early ventures were small-time, but clever, like swindling Ohio locals out of $300 for shares in a fake shipping company. But their big break, their Series A funding, was the 1887 Lee & Hoyt bank job. They snagged $5,000 in gold, nearly $200,000 today, and then, in a stroke of marketing genius, gave some of it away to the poor. This wasn't charity, it was brand building. It cemented Dutch's messianic image and attracted talent, disenfranchised gunslingers like Arthur Morgan, who bought into the vision. Arthur became the lead enforcer, the guy who actually generated revenue while Dutch was busy pontificating. But the Robin Hood Act was a lie. The money wasn't for the poor. It was to fund Dutch's ego and a lifestyle that was fundamentally unsustainable. Coming up, you'll see the exact moment this promising startup became a death spiral, all thanks to one toxic new hire and the worst deal in outlaw history.
Every startup has that one moment where it either scales to the moon or crashes and burns. For the van der Linde gang, that moment was the Blackwater ferry heist, and the catalyst was a toxic new hire named Micah Bell. Micah, the ultimate corporate psychopath, convinced Dutch to pivot the company strategy. Forget small, smart jobs. He pushed for a high-risk, high-reward play, robbing a ferry carrying $150,000 in bank money. In today's currency, that's a staggering $5.4 million. Hosea and Arthur, the seasoned executives, saw the catastrophic risk. They protested. It was too hot, too loud, too stupid. But Dutch, high on his own supply of charisma and swayed by Micah's sycophantic praise, overruled them. The result was a complete disaster, a hostile takeover by the Pinkerton agency. The heist turned into a bloodbath. Jenny Kirk dead, Davy Callender fatally wounded, Sean McGuire captured, and Dutch in the chaos murdered an innocent woman. They were forced to abandon the entire $5.4 million payload and flee into the mountains with nothing. This wasn't just a failed project, it was a catastrophic loss of capital that set a negative valuation on the entire enterprise. From this moment on, the gang wasn't building a future, they were just trying to outrun bankruptcy.
After the Blackwater fiasco, the gang was hemorrhaging cash. Welcome to the camp ledger, an accountant's nightmare and a perfect symbol of their broken economy. This ledger, which you can't even access until you start working for the gang's loan shark Leopold Strauss, is supposed to track the company's finances. In reality, it tracks how fast Arthur Morgan can personally fund a sinking ship. The entire system is a scam. Gang members are supposed to contribute, but their donations are pathetic. A dead squirrel here, a pocket watch there. Meanwhile, I remember my first playthrough pouring thousands of Arthur's dollars into that damn box just to upgrade Dutch's tent so he could be more comfortable while he schemed. Fully upgrading the camp for essentials like medicine, ammo, and a fast travel map for Arthur costs over $2,500. That's nearly $100,000 in modern money. And who pays for it? Mostly Arthur. If the camp funds are low, the ledger just dips right into Arthur's personal wallet. Dutch preaches about faith and community,
But he's running a commune where only one guy does all the work. The constant need to move camp from the snows of Coulter to the swamps of Linde was another massive cash drain. This wasn't a business, it was a money pit with a charismatic madman holding the shovel.
Outlaw stories love to focus on the big score, the gross payout. But in business, the only thing that matters is the net profit. And the van der Linde gang's profit margins were atrocious. Take the Valentine Bank heist. On paper, it was a huge success. The gang walked away with around $20,000, which is over $778,000 today. Arthur's personal cut was a respectable $2,500, almost $100,000. Fantastic, right? Wrong. The immediate aftermath was a massive shootout that put a huge bounty on their heads. That bounty is a direct operational expense. Add in the cost of ammo, supplies, and the economic impact of being forced to lay low, and that shiny gross figure shrinks fast. Then look at the Rhodes Bank job, a total disaster. The gross take was a measly $765, with Arthur getting just $137. That's about $5,300 for risking his life. The risk-reward ratio was completely broken. The ultimate example was the St. Denis Bank heist. This was supposed to be their IPO, the score to fund their exit to Tahiti. A city bank like that could have held hundreds of thousands of dollars. But thanks to Dutch's sloppy planning and the waiting Pinkertons, the net profit was negative. They lost Hosea and Lenny, two of their most valuable assets, and got John arrested. The financial cost was immense, but the human capital cost was irreversible. They were trading lives for pocket change, and Dutch kept calling it a plan. A good CEO invests capital to generate returns. Dutch van der Linde invested capital to generate chaos. His portfolio was a masterclass in what not to do. First, the Cornwall bonds. Stolen in a train robbery, they were a major asset, but they were also a ticking time bomb. They were so high profile, they were nearly impossible to liquidate, and their theft directly funded Leviticus Cornwall's private war against them via the Pinkertons. The bonds painted a target on their backs that cost them infinitely more in security expenses than the asset was ever worth. It was like buying a cursed diamond. Then, after the St. Denis job imploded, Dutch's brilliant escape plan was to pay a boat captain to smuggle them to Cuba. This wasn't an escape, it was a panicked, high-cost gamble, and it failed spectacularly. The ship sank in a storm, stranding them on Guarma. The investment returned $0 and got them stuck in a literal Banana Republic war. They lost time, resources, and any hope of a clean getaway. Every major financial decision Dutch made was reactive, emotional, and utterly devoid of due diligence. He wasn't investing in their future, he was buying lottery tickets with their lives, and the house always won.
By the end, the van der Linde gang wasn't a family. It was a toxic work environment on the verge of implosion. The financial strain poisoned everything. The biggest symptom of this cultural rot was Leopold Strauss and his predatory lending operation. While Dutch preached about freedom from tyranny, he had a loan shark on his payroll, sending Arthur to brutalize desperate, poor families for pennies. The Thomas Downs incident, where Arthur contracts tuberculosis while collecting a piddling debt, is the ultimate example of this moral bankruptcy. The revenue generated was minimal, but the moral cost was catastrophic, creating enemies and destroying the very soul of the gang. Then you have Micah Bell, the corporate saboteur, constantly whispering in the CEO's ear, pushing for more violence and sowing paranoia. Trust evaporated. The camp ledger dried up because no one wanted to invest in a company whose leadership was clearly insane. Why contribute to a communal pot when the CEO is listening to the office snake and making increasingly unhinged decisions? This forced Arthur to become the sole provider, grinding out cash while his own health and the company's was failing. The controversial truth is, Micah didn't destroy the gang. He was just a symptom of the disease that was Dutch's monumental ego and financial incompetence.
The final days of the van der Linde gang weren't a blaze of glory. They were a painful, protracted bankruptcy proceeding. Their final hideout, the miserable cave at Beaver Hollow, was their version of a Chapter 11 filing, a grim shelter for a company with no assets and no future. Dutch's final plans were just desperate liquidation sales. The Army payroll train robbery wasn't a strategic move. It was a frantic attempt to seize one last asset before the creditors, the Pinkertons, closed in for good. It was a chaotic, bloody mess that resulted in John Marston being shot and left for dead. The company was officially dissolved. And what about the seed capital that started this whole mess? That legendary $150,000 from Blackwater? It was a ghost, a phantom asset on a balance sheet that never existed. In the epilogue, John Marston finds a chest with Dutch and Micah, but it only contains $20,000, a fraction of the original haul. Whether they spent the rest or it was never all there to begin with is irrelevant. For the gang, it was vaporware. Arthur Morgan's final act wasn't a business transaction, it was a bailout. By giving John his remaining satchel of money, he made one final personal investment, not in Dutch's failed utopia, but in the future of the only family he had left. It was the only successful venture in the gang's entire history.
So there you have it. The Van der Linde gang wasn't gunned down by the law. They were driven into the ground by a delusional CEO with no business sense. Their fatal flaw wasn't a lack of bullets, it was a lack of a viable business plan, abysmal risk management, and an unsustainable burn rate. Hosea knew it. Arthur knew it. They were a cautionary tale written in red ink and blood. A perfect example that no matter how charismatic your leader is, a terrible business model will always lead to ruin. What do you think was Dutch's single worst financial decision? Argue about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this financial autopsy, liquidate that like button and subscribe for more content that doesn't require a leap of faith. Thanks for watching.